Hello, I am Jennifer Foxworthy, the founder and CEO of Inspirationally Speaking LLC and a founder of the Unstoppable You Women's Conference. I had the distinct pleasure of bringing the conference to the Hampton Roads, Virginia area on May 2nd, 2015. I had an extraordinary presenter in Candice Petrovich, who is a Diamond Beach body coach. You will be encouraged and motivated by her presentation. Your value is not in your number.
See on the scale, we can put our value in what we see in our bank account, what size dress we're buying. We put a lot of value in dates and planning. There's a lot of numbers that we as women have to juggle. And, you know, it can get so confusing and we can just put so much stock in all of these things. And, you know, and that was something that I really clung to for a long time. And today what I want to talk about is just kind of like my revelation of realizing that these numbers don't matter. They don't show us who we are as people. They don't show us what's in our hearts and what's in our minds. So I want to share with you just a little bit about me and about my journey on all of this. So I want to take you back to, there we go, to my wedding day. It was the happiest day of my life. August 17th, 2007, I was able to wear my grandmother's wedding dress, and I had a plan. I'm a big planner. You can ask my husband, it drives him crazy. And my plan was that we would have kids in 5 years, we would stay in our home state of Michigan, and I would pursue my career as a counselor. I'd have a quiet little office where I'd hear about people's, you know, small little problems here and there, have maybe a couch, sofa sitting there, some dim lighting, like I had it all in my head. And, you know, as always, God has a way of just changing all of that, right?
Yes, He will.
And He has a really good sense of humor with me. So there I was on my wedding day. I hadn't graduated grad school yet, but I had all these ideas and plans for our future and for our lives. And they weren't bad plans, but they weren't the plans that God had intended for us. So in our first 3 years of marriage, I still didn't have that dream job. In fact, the very first job that I had out of school was, as Jennifer mentioned, I worked at a county jail. I worked third shift, and I assessed people for suicide risk when they would come into the jail, you know, when they got arrested. Not what I pictured, and very, very intimidating to me to go from learning about all of these things in books to, you know, seeing people that were under the influence of drugs and alcohol screaming at me, throwing things at me. It was a huge eye-opener, and one that I had to toughen up with really fast. And, you know, I'm so thankful for that job, though. Through that job, I was able to meet friends that I still talk to this day, a wonderful supervisor who then became my mentor, and wonderful deputies that I worked with who protected me, who cared about me, and who respected what I did. And I was so thankful for that. The next thing on the list was that we still didn't have kids yet, but that was okay because we were 3 years in. My plan was 5. So that was all right, but I was, you know, starting to wonder, like, oh, maybe this isn't, you know, maybe something might be up, but, you know, I don't have time for that because that's in 2 years. And then the big thing happened. My husband, he worked at a medical supply company, and he'd been working there since before we'd been married. And he kind of took different positions throughout the company to kind of get himself acquainted, because his plan was to stay there and retire there. And he came home one day and he said, you know, Candice, there's a job in the office. At this point, he just was kind of working in the warehouse. And he's like, I'll get a 25-cent raise. And I said, in the office, you hate being on the phone. You don't even want to talk to me on the phone. You're going to have to take a job that you're going to be on the phone all day. And he's like, well, but I'll get a raise. And I said, okay, well, if you think so, because at that time, a 25-cent raise for us was a huge deal. At the jail, even though what I did kind of sounds cool and I've got a lot of stories about it, you don't really get paid very much at a job like that. And same for him, so we were a family that was definitely on a budget. And that 25-cent raise sounded pretty good to us. So he went and applied for the position, interviewed, got it, and then he found out that because we lived in Michigan, and it was 2010 at the time, I believe, which was at the height of just the economic crisis, and they decided that they couldn't give him that raise. And it was really upsetting for him because he kind of really liked his job in the warehouse, and now he's doing this other job where he wears a headset and in an office, and it just wasn't his thing, and I got so upset for him. And I said, Jordan, I said, we're 26. You don't have to do this. You don't have to stay here. And, I know we have a house and things, but God will take care of all of that if there's something else that you really want to do. And I had no idea what I was telling him when I said that. I thought that meant that he would, finish his degree or something. And he told me a couple of weeks later, he didn't say too much to me after that point, and I brought it up again, and I said, have you been thinking about what you really want to do? And he said, I have, but I don't want to tell you. And I said, well, why not? And he said, I don't think you're going to like it. And I said, well, just tell me what it is. Like, how bad could it be? In my mind, I thought, worst case scenario, he wants to be a police officer. Because I'm thinking, like, in terms of danger and, things like that. And he's like, no, actually what I really want to do is I want to join the military. I said, the military? Where is this coming from? I didn't know. My grandpa had been in the military, but that was the only experience I'd had with it. And he said, no, I want to be in the military, and I have a very specific job that I want to do. And he said, I've dreamed about it since I was a little boy. I was like, well, okay. And so, as you can see in this picture, this was me saying goodbye to him. He was on his way to Navy boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois, and it was a tough day that day. And that was just the beginning, really. I had no idea what I was in for. I didn't know a single military wife. I didn't know anything about being away from my husband for 8 weeks with no contact. We'd been married for 3 years. I'd been able to see him every single day, after we got out of work. But, I thought, oh, I can handle this. What, 8 weeks, who cares? And it was a big deal. I didn't understand that, laying in bed night after night, not having him there, not sitting alone, eating dinner, all those little tiny things that I had taken for granted were suddenly just swept out from underneath me. And it was nothing anybody could have told me about or prepared me for. I knew it would be hard, but I had no idea how hard it would actually be. And so that was where our story began. In the following year, if you see me there on your left, I guess it is, I became consumed with numbers. I was consumed about dates of when I would see him again because I really never saw him. For 11 months, we were separated. We had different addresses. And about once a month, I would be able to see him. And I didn't know how to handle that at all. And we had a lot of people thinking that we were crazy. And so I was consumed with this idea that, okay, I need to keep it together because all these people think that we can't do this, and I need to pretend like I'm completely fine. And me pretending I was fine was me going through a drive-through almost every single day after work, ordering a few meals, and eating all of them when I would get home and sitting in front of the TV. And that wasn't me. That wasn't who I was before all of this. And I knew there was a problem, but I just didn't I didn't want to accept it. I couldn't accept it. And so I was just consumed with, and he was consumed in his own world too because of the training that he was going through. He moved on from boot camp. He had to move out to California and finish out his training there. We were able to talk sometimes not at all, or sometimes 10 minutes a day. And for those of you in here who are military spouses or part of the military, you understand how all of that is. And your life is dictated by the military. And goodness, you know, I look at that picture of myself and I remember that moment because I remember literally counting down hours of how long I'd be able to spend with him. We were in San Diego and I was able to be there for about 3 days. And I remember that outfit because I had to buy it to go out because all of the clothes that I'd had before that point for the summertime didn't fit me anymore because I'd gained so much weight. And you know, I was just incredibly unhappy with myself. And then a huge thing happened for me. I had a friend who was a military spouse. I finally was able to move out to California and be with him when he's finishing out his training. And she introduced me to Beachbody. And, you know, she's like, she said, this is a really awesome company. You know, all you have to do is you share your story. You share your story of how this program is helping you. I'm like, well, I do have Insanity that I did about a week of, and I put it away. So, yeah, I can do that. And there was a military discount, so I thought, okay, you know, that sounds good to me. And I became a coach. And, you know, again, was faced with some opposition about that because here I was with a degree and it seemed as though I'd thrown it away to a lot of people. But what I discovered was that there was so much strength in finally being able to share my story and not having to pretend that I wasn't okay anymore. And you know, the funny thing about becoming open with your story is that you're able to help other people through that experience. And you know, and suddenly my viewpoint changed. And, you know, I don't know if it's because of Insanity or Shakeology, but it was because of the community that I was surrounded by now. People that truly cared about my health and wellness. And then me helping other people discover their health and wellness. It was a community like I had never been in before. And suddenly my viewpoint changed and I became so much happier and content. And so instead of being consumed by all of these different numbers and when Jordan was coming home and when he wasn't coming home, I was then consumed with just enjoying each moment that I had with him. And in the times when I wasn't with him, I was able to pour into all of these other people that I was able to help in our challenge groups and through the coaching business. And it was such a cool thing. And then when he would come home, I'd be able to kind of leave it aside just for a day or two, hang out with him, and then he'd up and leave again, and then I'd go back. And that was just so wonderful to be a part of something like that. And, you know, and the whole point, I guess, is, you know, I know I've got this before and after picture here, and it shows weight loss, and it shows, you know, a bigger smile on my face in the second one and all these things, but it's simply just an outward appearance of the change that had happened inside me and the change of having joy and having happiness. And so the numbers stopped mattering. To this day, I don't know how much I weigh, and I don't really care because I feel good and I feel awesome. And it just is something that I preach and preach to my challengers, because obviously we want to see change, but ultimately what the changes that we all want to see is the change that happens in ourselves and not just a quick fix. However, our journey with numbers was far from over. Even after that change, my husband was deployed last year until June, and we knew at that point that something was wrong in terms of being able to have kids, but we didn't know what that was. And so in July when he came home, he had an appointment with a urologist, and we were able to find out that he has a very rare condition and that he can't have kids. And that was so hard for us. And again, my life was consumed with numbers, because if you've ever been through the IVF process, or if you know of somebody who has been through it, you know that your life is consumed with numbers. Number of shots, hormone levels, doctor appointments, all of these different things. So in July, when we found that out, we kind of started the process. And just this past January, we went through our first IVF cycle, which had to be canceled because my hormone levels just didn't respond as well as they had hoped. So we canceled it early. Then we just recently went through a second cycle, which was successful all the way up until the end. And unfortunately, we found out that we weren't pregnant. And and that was really hard for us, because you think to yourself, all the numbers added up. Everything worked. Why didn't this happen? And again, I had to go back to this idea that my numbers don't matter. There is an ultimate plan for each of us. There is an ultimate plan that we as women have value and worth that is so beyond how many kids we have or don't have, or what our hormone levels are, or how many eggs they can get from me, or all these different things that I had to go through. And I just really, this slide's really hard. I just really want to make sure that you know that there's so much more to all of us than all of those various numbers that we can so much be consumed by. Oh. So we have to ask ourselves, how on earth do we avoid these numbers? And I think that the truth is that we can't really avoid them. When I was going through IVF, and when I'll go through it again later this year, I can't avoid them. I need to know the numbers. Or, when we're asking ourselves, like, I know I feel unhealthy, what's a good weight that I need to be at? I don't think that the idea is how to avoid the numbers, but how do we deal with them in a healthy way? So the thing that I've always found is that it's better for me to ask myself questions as opposed to giving myself statements. So I have to ask myself, how do I feel? And when Jordan was going through the 11 months of training that we were separated, I can tell you hands down, I felt awful. And then I contributed to that with poor healthy choices and just kind of a lot of bad habits that I got into. And I was consumed with, I know that I'm gaining weight. How do I lose it? I need to lose it. He's in the best shape of his life, and I'm over here gaining and gaining. And those kind of statements are just so awful for us, because it doesn't motivate us to do anything. It's just this pressure that we feel on ourselves. So I think the idea that we need to have is that we need to take that pressure off and ask ourselves, how do I feel, and what's my goal with that? And then another question to ask ourselves is, who can I help? Who can I help with this story of what I'm currently going through? And a lot of times we think that we have to wait and tell our story when everything's done and everything looks wonderful now. And that's just not true. I've found that out through my IVF process. I started a blog, and our journey certainly isn't over with it yet. We're still in the midst of all of it. And I can't tell you how many messages and emails I've received that have said, thank you so much for sharing your story. I've gone through 5 rounds of IVF and still no kids. And it's so, it kind of gives people this outlet of someone that they can talk to. Instead of feeling like, I'm the only one, nobody else is going through this is so embarrassing. Or the kind of things that we often think to ourselves as women. And I just think statements like that are they're so isolating. And what we need, and what Jennifer is doing here at this conference, is that we are a great support system to one another. And we are a force when we're together.
Yes.
And that's what we need to focus on. And then the final question I think to ask ourselves is, what are my goals? Instead of feeling like I'm so behind, Jordan and I, will have been married now 8 years in August. And a lot of people might say, oh, you're so far behind and you're getting older. When are you going to have kids? And who cares? Who cares? God has a plan for each of us. And it's not on anybody else's timeline except the one that He has. And it doesn't matter if you're here today and you are not married, or you are married, or you have kids, or you don't have kids, or you feel really overweight or underweight, all these different things, or I'm not at the place I want to be in my career. That's not the plan. The plan isn't to give us pressure. The plan is to help each other. The plan is to support one another. And the goal is to really fulfill what your dreams are, and the dreams that have been placed in our hearts. So those are the things that I think help us to at least get started on the right road of, instead of focusing on all these numbers and all of this pressure, because that's really what numbers are, right? It's pressure. And sometimes there's people that respond very well to that, but I have found that a lot of people don't respond well at all to it. And in fact, it's better to just focus on the things that you can control, because there's not a whole lot of control with numbers. I found that out in my own health. Believe it or not, between those two pictures, I did find out that I lost just 6 pounds. And and to me, it's like, no, this isn't like an amazing transformation story. But it was an amazing story for me because it was a place where I finally felt healthy and whole. And that, I think, should be the ultimate goal. And I just want to, this is all my information. I realize there's a lot of stuff up there. So if you're looking for somebody to give you accountability or support or help, please feel free to email me or come and see me over at my table. I would love to be able to share with you in what I do and how I do it. So I'll be with you every step of the way. So what I want to do now is just a small little exercise. I know we're all here in like business attire and skirts and things, but I'm going to ask you all just to stand up really quickly. We're just going to do a couple of little stretches, and then I have a little exercise for us. So, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready, girlfriend.
All right, so first what I want us to do is I want us to raise our right hand and go all the way over as far as you can. These are just simple stretches. Good job, everybody.
What if I can't get back up?
All right, now do it the opposite side. There you go. I know, I get so tight in my shoulders and my arms. It's impossible, so this is helpful.
My number is 42, I'm this old.
Now what I want us to do is put your arms, right arm over your left arm, and stretch as far as you can.
Surprise.
Good job. And then do it with the other one. Great job. Now this one, I don't know. If you have shoulder injury, you might want to be careful with it, but I want you to take your arm, put it over your head, and just stretch, pull on that elbow a little bit. If you're in a suit, it's going to be hard. And then do the same with the other.
Some of y'all showing off. I'm going to tell y'all that right now. Y'all showing off.
Now what I want you to do, now that you're all limbered up, I want you to take your hand, right or left, it doesn't matter, and I want you to point to, go as far back as you can. Sorry, come up here. And if you're as far back as you can, just kind of make a mental note of where you're at. And now what I want you to do is I want you to pick a spot that's a little bit further than where you are. Okay? So have that spot, think about it in your head. Now I want you to take your hand back. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to think about that spot. Think about where it is, and I want you to point to it. Turn back around with your torso and go all the way to that spot. Did everybody get further than they did the first time?
Mm-hmm.
What I want to show you is that our minds, our minds are incredibly powerful. When we have a vision, and I know this is a point on a wall, but when we have a vision in our minds, we can achieve it. We can achieve more than what we think is possible. And I want to show you that, and I just want to show you that a point on the wall can easily become a dream in your heart. And I just want to thank you so much again for having me here. And I just thank you so much. And just remember that your dreams and your goals, you can absolutely achieve them. Don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about where you think you should be at or shouldn't be at. Think about where you want to be and then go after that. Take small steps every single day to get yourself there. Thanks so much, everyone.